For some, love can be a fickle thing. In some cases, people fall in love with someone early on in their lives, be it high school or college, and they stay with that person for decades. I truly admire those people. For others, it can take quite a bit longer to finally find that perfect match. Sadly, some people never seem to succeed in that aspect. Though for the most part, by the time people are ready to settle down and have kids and start a family, they have found that special someone. During my last semester in college, I met somebody. I had arrived to one of my classes a bit too early. Although the class seemed empty, the door was unlocked, so I figured I'd let myself in and wait for everyone else to arrive. When I cracked open the door, I noticed that I wasn't actually the first to arrive. There was somebody else already waiting in the far corner of the room. She glanced over at me when I entered, and flashed a forced smile in my direction. I returned the gesture and sat in an empty seat nearby. Time ticked by slowly, and I decided to pass the time by scrolling through my social media on my phone. I glanced over at the girl a few minutes later and saw that she happened to be doing the same thing as me. It wasn't long after that I noticed how much time had passed since her and I had been sitting there. I was beginning to wonder where the other students were, as well as the professor. I navigated my phone to my emails and waited for them to update. There it was, a notification from my professor stating that due to unfortunate circumstances the class will not be held today. She must have not seen the email either, I thought. I stood up and walked over to her. She looked up from her phone. I told her that I had received an email about this class being canceled and asked her if she had received the same thing. A look of surprise washed over her face as she quickly thumbed through her phone. A few seconds later, she confirmed that she too had received the email and stated that she felt like an idiot. I told her that I empathized with that statement and she just returned a defeated laugh. I introduced myself and asked her name. She told me it was Sarah. I asked her if she didn't have anywhere else to be, if she wanted to grab some lunch with me. There was a trendy sandwich shop a short walk away from the school. She looked me over suspiciously for a few moments, then agreed. We walked, ate lunch, talked about our lives, then returned to school. Sarah and I started dating shortly after that. I'm not entirely sure why, but we clicked instantly. From that moment forward, we had become inseparable. We did everything together. Movies, dinners, get-togethers, you name it. After around 4 months, she asked me to move into her apartment with her. I was hesitant at first. Moving in with someone is a pretty big step in a relationship, and not one to be taken lightly. I found myself constantly wondering if that would be the straw that would break our relationship. Regardless, I wanted to be with her, and I wanted to make this work, so I accepted. I started to move in a few days later, and to be quite honest, I couldn't have been happier. 2 months later, we both graduated college and started working full-time. Ironically, even though I had a degree in computer science, most places that were hiring wanted years of experience, which I didn't possess. I ended up working as a rent-a-cop at a strip mall, while Sarah, who had gotten a degree in business, was hired on at some logistics company. Even though I felt inferior, she never once looked down on me or treated me any less than herself. I was grateful for that. The months started to fly by, and even though my work situation wasn't ideal, I was still very happy with my life. Then, one day, Sarah didn't come home from work for 4 hours after her shift. After the first hour, I tried to call and text her, but I didn't receive a response. 2 hours passed by and I was about to call the police when she finally texted me back. She said a work meeting ran late and that she was now on her way home. I apologized for blowing up her phone and she told me it was fine. The days that followed, Sarah had gotten into the habit of coming home at well past the end of her shift. At first, I wasn't concerned. I just thought she was having a rough week or two at work. Then, one evening after she had gotten home, she jumped into the shower while I was watching TV in bed. She had tossed her phone on the bed next to me and I thought nothing of it. Now, I should mention, I'm not one of those overbearing, snooping boyfriends. I try not to go looking for trouble if I can avoid it. Plus, I honestly had no reason to be suspicious. Then, her phone buzzed and illuminated next to me. She had received a text from a random number. I casually glanced over at her phone and read the message. The text said, "I hope to see you again soon." Reading that was odd. If that was somebody from her work, why would they send that when they see her every day? A few more days had gone by since then, and surprisingly, Sarah had been coming home at a normal time after work. I reassured myself that I was overreacting. Then, a week later, it started up again. She started coming home later and later. During one of those days, I contacted one of her coworkers, a friend who works in the same department. I sent her a message and asked if her and Sarah were in a meeting at work. What she sent back increased my suspicions tenfold. She said, "Everyone left work hours ago. Nobody stayed behind." I thanked her before sulking for a few minutes. I was assuming the worst. Sarah had finally gotten fed up with me and found somebody better. I thought we were both happy, that our lives, albeit imperfect, were still enjoyable, that our relationship wasn't dull. I decided that since I had the following day off work, I'd follow Sarah. I wasn't sure what I would do if I actually caught her in the act with somebody else, but I needed to know. I waited outside her work until her shift ended, and slowly but surely, everyone from her office building began pouring out into their cars. Then I saw Sarah exit. She rushed over to her car, hopped in, and began driving away, in the opposite direction of our apartment. I began following her from a distance, trying to make sure she wouldn't spot me and recognize the car. She had gotten onto the highway for around 20 minutes before exiting into the industrial sector of our city. She finally stopped her car near the back of an old worn-down warehouse of some sort. I parked nearby, wondering if this was the spot of her romantic rendezvous. I got out of the car and tiptoed over to the building. After trying unsuccessfully to peek through one of the dirt-covered windows, I spied a nearby fire escape. I climbed the ladder and found the door at the top to be surprisingly unlocked. I cracked the door slightly and I could instantly hear people speaking inside. I opened it a bit further and stepped onto a catwalk inside the building, before quickly shutting the door behind me. I peered over the railing and what I saw gave me pause. Sarah was standing near a group of people. They were all wearing masks of random animals. Sarah was as well, but I could still recognize her by her clothing. A man wearing the mask of a bear was saying something that sounded akin to a prayer. They all joined hands briefly before two of them broke off and walked to a darkened area of the warehouse. Muffled shouts began to fill the room as I watched the two from before drag a man into the light and throw him to the ground. The group of disguised individuals all lowered their heads upon the man as he begged through his binds. As I leaned farther for a closer look, a loose pipe from the catwalk came free and fell to the ground below. The clattering metal rang out endlessly. In one swift motion, all the masked individuals looked up at me. I quickly turned and ran out of the door. I slid down the fire escape, falling into the dirt below. I scrambled to my feet and ran to my car. I sped out of that area without looking back. During the drive home, a million things were going through my head. Who were those people? Why was Sarah with them? Who was that man and what were they going to do to him? I made it home and packed up as much of my stuff as possible. I decided it would be best to get a hotel room before I tried to figure this stuff out. Once I felt safe in the hotel room, I made an anonymous tip to the police about the warehouse. though I'm not sure if they ever found anything, because Sarah contacted me about an hour or two later, telling me she was home and asking me where I was. I stayed at the hotel for a few days. During that time, I messaged Sarah and told her that my mother had gotten sick, and I had to leave to go see her. I didn't receive a reply. I made a trip back to her apartment yesterday, and I found it completely emptied. I asked management if they knew what happened. They said that Sarah had paid off the remainder of her rent, had a bunch of people pack up her stuff, and she left. At this point, I have more questions than answers, and I feel as though Sarah knows that I was there that night. And these past few days, I can't seem to shake the feeling that I'm being watched.